September 3rd, 1939. The Admiralty, Whitehall, London. Rain hammers the windows as the city slips into blackout. Deep in the building's corridors, a young Royal Navy lieutenant, his uniform still smelling faintly of damp wool, stands over a wall map of the Atlantic. Pins and thread mark convoy routes like veins. Somewhere out there, in gray swells in low cloud, German submarines are already moving. The lieutenant's name is unimportant, because tonight he represents a whole institution suddenly forced to relearn fear. A clerk brings in a folded signal slip fresh from the wireless rooms, dots and dashes turned into groups of letters, meaningless without the key. The lieutenant watches an older commander skim it, jaw tightening. The message is German naval traffic, crisp, disciplined, and impenetrable. It might as well be written in smoke. Outside, the muffled thump of anti-aircraft drills rolls over London.
Inside, the Admiralty's greatest enemy is silence. The silence between what the Germans say to one another and what Britain can understand. Convoys will soon push west under escort, columns of merchantmen whose decks carry food, fuel, aircraft parts, ammunition. Each ship is a promise that the island will not starve. Each is also a target that can be found, not by sight, but by information. Cut north, same night, Buckinghamshire countryside, a Victorian mansion surrounded by darkness, Bletchley Park. The trains are still running, but dimmed, guarded, watched. A woman in civilian clothes steps off at Bletchley Station with a small suitcase and a letter ordering her to report to Station X. She doesn't know what the job is. The man who meets her doesn't offer a handshake, he offers a warning. Don't discuss your work, not with family, not with friends, not with anyone, not ever. She follows him along narrow roads to the estate.
Inside the mansion, the air smells of coal smoke, damp paper, and overbrewed tea. A clerk points her toward a wooden hut. From within comes the clatter of typewriters and the low murmur of hurried voices, educated voices, some with university polish, some with regional edges, all pressed into the same urgent rhythm. On a table lies an object that looks ordinary until you understand it, a German Enigma machine, captured, borrowed, reconstructed, its keys like a typewriter's, its rotors like the locked tumblers of a safe. At Bletchley, the war is fought with pencils, index cards, and exhaustion. The work begins upstream, far from these huts, at coastal WWII stations, where wireless operators and headphones copy German Morse at speed, hour after hour, until their wrists ache and their eyes blur. The intercepts are sent here, bundles of enciphered messages, where they become the raw material for a different kind of combat. In one hut, a classical scholar with a pale, intense stare, Dilly Knox, works like a man trying to remember a half-forgotten language. He has been wrestling ciphers since the previous war and carries his expertise like an old wound. Not far away, a younger mathematician, Alan Turing, arrives with an awkward gait and a mind that seems to run ahead of conversation. He studies Enigma's procedure sheets and rotor wirings as if he's listening for the machine's habits, its tiny human assumptions. Enigma is not one cipher, but many, the same concept endlessly reshuffled. Rotors are swapped, ring settings changed, plugboard cables moved. Each day is a new lock. Each message is another door slammed in the Allies' faces. Yet Enigma also depends on operators, men in cramped radio rooms, under pressure, repeating phrases, following routines, making small mistakes. Bletchley lives for those mistakes. A Royal Navy officer visits from London, his boots still wet, his voice restrained with frustration. He points at the Atlantic map pinned in a Bletchley office. "We don't need poetry," he says. "We need positions. We need to know where the wolfpacks are." Turing doesn't look offended. He looks distant, as if the map is merely a shadow of the real battlefield, one made of settings, indicators, and time.
Beside him, Gordon Welchman, sharp-eyed, practical, talks quietly about organization, how to connect fragments, how to turn scattered intercepts into something that can move ships. In the early months, victories come in inches, then vanish. A partial read of yesterday's traffic becomes useless at midnight when the keys change. A promising lead collapses because one missing detail breaks the entire chain. The woman from the train, now a wren in uniform, learns to file and cross-reference until her fingertips are stained with ink.
She hears the words Hut 6 and Hut 8 spoken like unit names at the front. She hears another word, too, spoken softly, almost superstitiously, ultra. She doesn't know yet what ultra will mean in the Atlantic, how it will pull convoys away from invisible killers, and how many lives will depend on reading the enemy's mind without letting him know it has been read. For now, Bletchley is still feeling along the wall in the dark, trying to find the door handle before the U-boats find the ships. January 12th, 1940. Hut 8, Bletchley Park. A paraffin heater ticks in the corner, failing to push warmth into the damp wooden walls. Alan Turing stands over a trestle table littered with rotor charts and penciled cribs, guessed plain-text fragments like Wette für Heersaga and Angst, the kind of routine wording German operators can't help but reuse. He doesn't speak much. He taps a pencil against his teeth, eyes fixed on a pattern only he can see. A messenger arrives breathless from the teleprinter room, arms full of fresh intercepts. The pages smell of hot ink. Somewhere along Britain's coast, a wireless operator has been listening to German naval circuits and copying groups at speed, each group a brick in a wall. Here, those bricks have to be rearranged into a doorway before midnight changes the locks again. Turing's method is brutally practical. Don't try every possibility in the human mind. Build a machine to do the grinding. The concept already exists in seed form, carried to Britain through the quiet heroism of Polish cryptanalysts who had studied Enigma before the war. But the naval version is harder. More rotors, tighter procedures, a more disciplined enemy. If the Army Enigma is a strongbox, Naval Enigma is a bank vault. In a different building, behind doors marked with warnings and watched by armed police, the first British bombs begin to run. They aren't sleek computers, they're towering cabinets of rotating drums, wires, relays, and motor noise, mechanical logic pushed to its limit. When they start, the room fills with a steady clatter like heavy rain on metal roofing. Wrens in uniform monitor the machines with the calm of artillery crews, reading dials, swapping drum orders, listening for the moment the bomb changes its tone. That moment matters because it might mean a stop, a plausible set of Enigma settings that could unlock an entire day's traffic.
A young wren leans in, pencil poised, and calls out to the supervisor with a voice made careful by training. Stop on position, now. Runners move, fast but controlled, carrying the candidate settings back to the huts where the final test happens on a Typex machine configured to mimic Enigma. Paper feeds through, letters hammer onto the page. For a second, it's gibberish. Then suddenly, German words fall into place like a photograph coming into focus. That is when the war in the Atlantic changes shape, not with a single dramatic announcement, but with a quiet intake of breath in Hut 8. Because a readable message is not just information, it is location, intent, and time. It is a U-boat patrol line drawn in invisible ink across the ocean. March 1st, 1941. Western approaches Liverpool. A convoy commodore grips the rail as his ship shudders in heavy seas. The escort destroyer off his beam, gray hull, white wake, pitches like a knife thrown into waves. In the escort's cramped radio room, a signalman receives a message stamped with the bland authority of the Admiralty. The wording is cautious,
stripped of anything that might betray its source, but the meaning is unmistakable. Alter course. No one says ultra. They say from reliable sources. They say Admiralty advises. They say intelligence indicates. The convoy turns, one ship at a time, columns bending in the Atlantic dark. To the men on deck, it feels like another weary zigzag, another superstition against torpedoes. Only a handful in London and Bletchley understand the real reason. Somewhere ahead, a wolfpack is waiting in a patrol line, listening for propellers. Out there, in a U-boat's control room lit by red lamps, a Capitanoid nut studies his own orders, perfectly confident in Enigma's secrecy. The boat's hydrophony operator whispers bearings. Diesel fumes, sweat, and battery acid hang in the air. The commander expects silhouettes on the horizon by nightfall. But the ocean remains empty. In Bletchley's huts, Gordon Welchman pushes for something that feels almost mundane, but becomes decisive. Better traffic analysis, better indexing, better ways to connect one decrypted fragment to another. A single read message can save a convoy. A system can save a campaign. Each night becomes a race, bombs running, clerks filing, analysts cross-checking call signs and grid squares, because dawn will bring new keys and new sinkings if they fail. By spring, the pattern is clear to the people who live in this secret world. If the decrypts stop, ships will die. And sooner or later, the decrypts will stop, because the Germans will change something. February 1st, 1942. Hut 8, Bletchley Park. The silence arrives not with drama, but with absence. A teleprinter sits idle. A filing cabinet drawer closes on empty folders. Alan Turing stands at the blackboard, chalk in hand, staring at equations that no longer connect to readable traffic. The German Navy has changed the game. The new machine is called Triton by the enemy, Shark by Bletchley, a 4-rotor Enigma reserved for U-boat command. Where 3 rotors created millions of combinations, 4 creates billions. The bombs, designed for 3-rotor logic, cannot cope. Overnight, the Atlantic convoys lose their guardian angel. In the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center, deep in the bowels of Whitehall, a naval officer named Roger Wynne moves pins across a chart with the grim precision of a man watching friends drown. Each pin represents a convoy. Each gap in knowledge represents tonnage lost. Before Shark, ultra-intelligence allowed him to route ships around known threats. Now he must guess, and guessing costs lives measured by the thousands. March through October 1942, the killing season. U-boat commanders, emboldened and undetected, hunt with near impunity. Tankers break apart in mid-Atlantic, fuel spilling into cold water. Freighters loaded with grain and aircraft engines settle nose first into the deep. Survivors cling to rafts, waiting for rescue that sometimes never comes. The wolfpacks grow bolder, operating in coordinated sweeps, their radio traffic encrypted beyond Bletchley's reach. At Bletchley, the mood turns brittle. Turing works on theoretical attacks against the 4-rotor problem, but theory needs cribs, pieces of known plaintext to give the bombs something to grip. Without intercepts that can be broken, there are no cribs. Without cribs, there is no way forward. The circular trap tightens. In Hut 8, a young mathematician named Joan Clark organizes what fragments remain. Call signs, procedural quirks, the faint shadows of traffic analysis. She works with the patience of someone refusing to accept defeat as permanent. Beside her, others catalog every scrap, weather reports sent in short signal format, convoy sighting messages, anything that might betray a pattern. Then, in late October, fortune shifts. October 30th, 1942, Eastern Mediterranean, off Port Said. HMS Petard closes on a damaged U-boat, U-559, wallowing after depth charges. The submarine's commander gives the order to scuttle and abandon ship. British sailors don't wait. Lieutenant Tony Fasson and able seaman Colin Grazier plunge into the sinking U-boat's conning tower, descending into darkness lit only by failing emergency lamps. Water pours in around them. They pass up codebooks, charts, and crucially, Enigma settings material, pages that will cost them their lives as the boat takes its final plunge. The documents reach Bletchley in a courier's locked case.
Analysts recognize the prize immediately. Current procedures for the four-rotor machine. It is not a key, but it is a doorway. Engineers begin modifying bombs to handle four rotors, a slower, more expensive process, but now guided by captured knowledge. December 13th, 1942. Bomb room, outstation, somewhere in England. The modified four-rotor bomb runs for the first time against live shark traffic. The noise is different, heavier, slower, drums turning through combinations at a pace that feels agonizing. Hours pass. Wrens change shifts. Supervisors check calibration. Then, in the small hours of morning, the machine stops. A wren reads the settings. A Type X machine is configured. Rotors click into place. The first shark message decrypts cleanly, German words appearing like a voice emerging from static. In Hut 8, someone exhales. No one cheers. There is too much work ahead, too many bombs to modify, too many messages backed up. But the blackout is over. The U-boats are speaking again, and this time, Bletchley can hear them. By January 1943, the intelligence flow resumes. Roger Wynn's wall map fills with updated positions. Convoys alter course based on special intelligence. Losses begin to drop. The wolfpacks, still confident in their ciphers' invincibility, continue broadcasting their positions, intentions, and fuel states, never imagining that every transmission is being read within hours. The tide in the Atlantic has not yet turned, but the scales are tipping. In London, Churchill will later say that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the U-boat peril. What he does not say publicly, and cannot, not for decades, is that the men and women at Bletchley gave him the one thing a leader cannot command: foreknowledge.
May 4th, 1943. North Atlantic. Convoy, ONS-5. The escorts circle like sheepdogs around 42 merchantmen, their ASDIC pinging into the black water below. The convoy commodore knows what the charts don't show. Somewhere in the dark, a concentration of U-boats has been ordered to this exact grid square. What he doesn't know, what he can never be told, is that the Admiralty learned this days ago from decrypted signals. Additional escorts have been diverted. Aircraft with extended range are inbound. The trap is being set not by luck, but by reading the enemy's playbook in real time. When the wolfpack strikes, it finds not vulnerable prey, but coordinated defense. Destroyers race toward contact reports. Depth charges hammer the thermoclines. U-boats dive deep, their commanders confused by the impossibly precise response. By dawn, the convoy has lost ships. War is never clean, but the U-boats have lost more.
Boats sunk, commanders rattled, the invisible confidence of operational secrecy beginning to crack. Admiral Karl Donitz, commanding the U-boat fleet from his headquarters in Paris, studies loss reports with mounting suspicion. Too many boats are being found. Too many convoys are evading patrol lines. He orders investigations into possible security breaches, traitors, spies, radar advances, high-frequency direction finding. Enigma itself he trusts completely. The mathematicians have assured him it is unbreakable. At Bletchley, that trust is a lifeline. Every decrypted message must be handled with surgical care to protect the source.
a new system emerges, codename Ultra, governed by rules that feel almost paranoid. Never act on Ultra intelligence alone if it might reveal the secret. If a convoy is rerouted, send reconnaissance aircraft to spot the U-boats first, creating a plausible cover story. If a supply ship is to be sunk, make sure surface ships or planes can claim credit.
The intelligence must be invisible. In the Mediterranean, the deception becomes even more elaborate. When Ultra reveals the exact route of an Axis convoy carrying fuel to Rommel's Africa Corps, the RAF doesn't simply intercept. First, a reconnaissance plane is sent, visibly, to discover the convoy. Only then do the bombers arrive. The enemy sees a lucky patrol, not a broken cipher. June 1943, somewhere in North Africa, British headquarters. A young intelligence officer briefs field commanders on enemy positions, tank concentrations, supply dumps, artillery batteries, all gleaned from decrypted Enigma traffic. The information is presented as coming from a reliable source or agents in the field. The commanders don't question it, they simply act. Some will fight the entire war never knowing that their tactical brilliance was often guided by an invisible hand in Buckinghamshire.
Monty, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, understands the value of this intelligence, even if he doesn't know its precise source. Before El Alamein, he receives updates on Rommel's fuel shortages, unit strengths, and defensive plans. The German commander is fighting blind, while Montgomery can see the board. When Rommel requests reinforcements and resupply, his encrypted messages are being read in Hut 6 within hours. When he reports his intentions to Berlin, Bletchley knows before some of his own officers. But Ultra is not omniscient. It depends on the enemy transmitting, on operators making mistakes, on cribs being found, on bombs running successfully before keys change. There are days when the circuit goes dark. There are messages that resist every attack. And there is always the nightmare scenario. What if the Germans discover the breach? Back at Bletchley, security is absolute. Workers live in sealed worlds, knowing only their own small piece of the puzzle.
Hut 6 breaks Army and Air Force Enigma. Hut 8 handles naval traffic. The Newmanry, named after mathematician Max Neumann, tackles the even more complex Lorenz cipher used for high-level German command communications. No one discusses their work outside. Letters home are censored. Leave is monitored. The secret is kept not by a few, but by thousands. An entire invisible army bound by oath and fear of what breaking that oath would cost. A Wren filing intercepts in Hut 3 will not know that her work is saving ships in the Atlantic. A bomb operator adjusting drum settings will not know her machine is preparing the ground for D-Day. They know only that the work matters, that it must be done quickly, and that silence is the price of victory. In London, Churchill receives daily Ultra summaries in a locked box, reading them alone, then returning them to be destroyed. He calls Bletchley the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. The metaphor is precise.
The intelligence is priceless, but only if the enemy never hears the noise. By mid-1943, Ultra has become woven into Allied planning at every level. Convoy routing, deception operations, bombing priorities, invasion planning, all are shaped by the invisible flow of decrypted signals. The war is still brutal, still uncertain, but one side is fighting with sight, while the other gropes in darkness. And the darkness is about to deepen.
January 15th, 1944. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, London. General Dwight Eisenhower studies reconnaissance photos of the Normandy coast. Concrete bunkers, beach obstacles, artillery positions. But the photographs show only what the enemy wants seen. What matters more are the decrypts arriving daily from Bletchley,
German assessments of Allied intentions, troop dispositions along the Atlantic Wall, Rommel's inspection reports, fuel and ammunition states for panzer divisions. The invasion of Europe will be the largest amphibious operation in history, and it will succeed or fail based on where the Germans expect it. Ultra reveals that enemy high command is divided. Some believe Normandy is the target. Others are certain the Allies will strike at Pas de Calais, the shortest route across the Channel.
This division is not accidental. It is cultivated through Operation Fortitude, an elaborate deception that feeds the German intelligence apparatus exactly what Allied planners want them to believe. Phantom armies appear in southeastern England, inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, false supply dumps. The Germans intercept signals suggesting a massive force under General Patton preparing to assault Calais. Enigma decrypts confirm the deception is working. German intelligence reports assess the phantom formations as real, and Hitler keeps powerful reserves positioned away from Normandy. At Bletchley, the pressure intensifies. Every decrypt related to the Atlantic Wall, every movement order for German divisions, every fuel shortage report becomes critical. Hut 3, where raw decrypts are translated and analyzed, runs on shifts that blur into exhaustion.
Intelligence officers draft summaries that reach Eisenhower's desk within hours, stripped of any hint of their source, but precise in their implications. A young translator working late into the night processes a decrypt from Field Marshal von Rundstedt's headquarters, a request to move the 12th SS Panzer Division closer to the coast. She types the translation, passes it to the duty officer, and watches it disappear into the courier system. She will never know that this single decrypt influences the decision to accelerate the invasion timeline. June 5, 1944. The English Channel, evening. 5,000 ships heave through rough seas toward Normandy. In their holds and on their decks, 156,000 men prepare for the most dangerous crossing of their lives. Most know nothing of Ultra. They know only the mission, the stakes, and the fear that tightens every chest. But in the operations rooms aboard command ships, senior officers carry a secret confidence.
Ultra has confirmed that the German High Command still believes Calais is the primary target. The panzer reserves that could crush the beachhead remain positioned too far north, waiting for an invasion that will never come. When the first landing craft grind onto Omaha and Utah, Gold and Juno and Sword, the German response is fierce but fragmented. Local commanders fight with courage and skill, but the decisive reserves, the forces that could turn the tide, hesitate. Hitler, receiving conflicting reports and still convinced Normandy is a feint, refuses to release the panzers until it's too late. Decrypts flow into Allied headquarters throughout D-Day and beyond. Each message reveals German confusion, fuel shortages, unit positions, and Hitler's own strategic misjudgments. When Rommel requests permission to withdraw from exposed positions, Bletchley reads the request before Berlin's answer arrives.
When German commanders report critical ammunition shortages, Allied planners know where to press the advantage. The breakout from Normandy, the race across France, the liberation of Paris, all are shaped by intelligence that remains invisible to the soldiers who fight and die for each kilometer. Ultra cannot stop bullets or replace courage, but it tips every battle toward those who can read the enemy's mind. By autumn 1944, Germany is collapsing inward, and still the decrypts flow. The Lorenz cipher, broken by the Colossus machines at Bletchley, the world's first programmable electronic computers, reveals Hitler's strategic communications with his army group commanders. The Allies read his orders, his anxieties, his denials of reality. They watch the Third Reich disintegrate in real time, one encrypted message at a time.
December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls through pine branches as German tanks rumble westward in Hitler's last great gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. For American units dug into forward positions, the attack comes as a shock. Entire panzer divisions emerging from winter fog, breakthrough after breakthrough, the front collapsing. But at Bletchley, the shock came earlier. In the weeks before the offensive, Ultra had detected unusual radio silence from German units on the Western Front, a silence more ominous than traffic. Then came fragments, Luftwaffe decrypts mentioning fuel allocations, railway movements detected through Lorenz intercepts, whispers of a major operation codenamed Herbstnebel, autumn mist. The intelligence was passed to Supreme Headquarters, but interpreting silence is harder than reading explicit orders. German operational security was tighter than ever. Some in Allied command dismissed the warnings.
Others believed the Wehrmacht no longer capable of offensive operations. The truth lay somewhere between. Ultra provided pieces of the puzzle, but not the complete picture. When the offensive erupts, Ultra shifts to damage control. Every decrypt revealing German fuel shortages, ammunition states, and unit positions flows to field commanders. Patton's Third Army pivots north with remarkable speed made possible partly by intelligence that shows exactly where German strength is concentrated and where gaps can be exploited. By January 1945, the bulge is crushed, and the decrypts tell the story of Germany's last reserves burning away in the Ardennes snow. Fuel trucks empty, panzer companies immobilized, Hitler's orders becoming increasingly detached from reality. The Enigma and Lorenz traffic reveals not just military collapse, but psychological disintegration at the highest levels. March 7, 1945. Remagen Bridge, Rhine River.
American forces capture the Ludendorff Bridge intact, a stroke of fortune that opens the path into Germany's heart. Within hours, Bletchley decrypts panicked German signals ordering its destruction, demanding explanations, shuffling units to contain the bridgehead. Every decrypt confirms German desperation and guides Allied exploitation. At Bletchley Park, the pace remains relentless even as victory becomes inevitable. Hut 6 processes Wehrmacht traffic, revealing the locations of concentration camps, allowing liberating forces to prepare medical and logistical support. Naval decrypts track the last U-boats, still hunting even as their bases fall. Lorenz intercepts show Hitler's final commands from the Berlin bunker, orders to units that no longer exist, fantasies of counterattacks that will never come. April 30th, 1945, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker. May 7th, Germany surrenders. The Enigma machines go silent.
In Bletchley's huts, exhausted men and women set down their pencils and stare at suddenly quiet bombs. Some cry, some simply sit in numb silence. They have won a war most of the world doesn't know they fought. Then comes the order that will define the next 3 decades: silence. Churchill himself directs that Ultra remain classified at the highest level. The reasoning is brutally practical. Britain has distributed captured Enigma machines to its former colonies and to nations within its sphere of influence. If the secret breaks, those cipher systems become worthless overnight. The intelligence advantage must be preserved. The personnel of Bletchley Park are summoned to briefings where the message is unambiguous. Everything you have done, everything you have seen, every person you worked with, it is now sealed under the Official Secrets Act. You will not speak of it. Not to family, not to historians, not in your memoirs. The penalty for violation is prison.
Alan Turing returns to academic life, his war service a blank space in his biography. The persecution that follows, his arrest for homosexuality, the chemical castration, His death in 1954 happens while his greatest achievement remains locked in government vaults. Gordon Welchman emigrates to America, never able to discuss the systems he helped create. Dilly Knox had died in 1943, taking his secrets to the grave. Joan Clark returns to a world that thinks she spent the war doing clerical work. The bombs are dismantled, the huts are cleared. Bletchley Park becomes a training college, then falls into disrepair. Thousands of people carry the weight of untold history, watching as books are published and films are made about the war, knowing that the most decisive intelligence operation in history remains invisible. Not until 1974, when Group Captain F.W. Winterbotham publishes the ultra-secret, does the wall of silence begin to crack. Slowly, carefully, the story emerges.
Veterans speak publicly for the first time, their relief palpable. Historians reassess battles and campaigns with the missing variable finally revealed. A quiet suburb outside London. An elderly woman reads a newspaper article about Bletchley Park, her hands trembling slightly. The byline mentions Alan Turing, finally receiving public recognition decades after his death. She sets down the paper and looks at her daughter across the breakfast table. "I knew him," she says quietly. "I worked with him." It is the first time she has spoken these words aloud to family. 31 years of silence, finally broken. Across Britain and in scattered corners of the world, similar conversations unfold. Veterans in their 60s and 70s, former Wrens, cryptanalysts, bomb operators, translators, finally exhale secrets that have pressed against their ribs for decades. Some discoveries are intimate, husbands and wives learning that their spouses worked in adjacent huts at Bletchley and never knew. Others are institutional, military historians realizing that entire campaign analyses need revision.
The historical consensus forms gradually but decisively. Ultra-intelligence shortened the war in Europe by at least 2 years, possibly more. 2 years measured not in calendar pages, but in lives. Soldiers who came home instead of dying in 1946. Civilians who survived rather than starving in a prolonged siege. Concentration camp prisoners who lived because liberation came sooner. General Eisenhower himself, after the secret's release, states it plainly. Ultra was decisive. The Allied victory was never guaranteed by industrial capacity or numerical superiority alone. It was secured by the ability to read the enemy's intentions and position forces accordingly. Every convoy that reached port safely, every ambush avoided, every weak point identified and exploited. The sum total is incalculable. In the Atlantic alone, the mathematics are brutal. At the war's peak, U-boats were sinking ships faster than they could be built.
Without Ultra, the lifeline to Britain likely would have been severed, forcing negotiation or starvation. With Ultra, the Battle of the Atlantic turned from desperate defense to calculated victory. By May 1943, Black May for the U-boats, German submarine losses became unsustainable. Dennett never understood why. The human cost of secrecy also becomes clear. Alan Turing, persecuted and broken by the same government he saved, never lived to see his vindication. Others spent decades believing their contributions were forgotten or unimportant, never knowing that Churchill himself had called their work the single most valuable source of intelligence in the war. Modern historians, with access to declassified archives, trace Ultra's fingerprints across nearly every major Allied operation: North Africa, Sicily, Italy, Normandy, the Ardennes, the final drive into Germany. Each campaign's success rested partly on commanders who could anticipate enemy moves, because Bletchley was reading the mail.
The technology itself proves equally consequential. The bombs and Colossus machines, created under the pressure of wartime necessity, become ancestors of the digital age. The theories developed by Turing and his colleagues lay groundwork for modern computing. Codebreaking at Bletchley becomes a birthplace not just of victory, but of the information revolution. Today, Bletchley Park is a museum. The huts have been restored. Visitors walk through rooms where the fate of the world pivoted on pencil marks and rotor settings. A memorial to Alan Turing stands in the grounds. Guides tell the story that was hidden for a generation, the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary intellectual work under conditions of absolute secrecy. The lesson is uncomfortable and permanent. Wars are won not only by soldiers on battlefields, but by minds in quiet rooms, by patience in the face of impossible problems, by the courage to keep secrets, even when recognition would be sweet.
The men and women of Bletchley Park fought without glory, won without praise, and remained silent when every instinct demanded they speak. They gave the Allies the rarest of wartime gifts, the ability to see the future before it arrived. In doing so, they shortened the war by 2 years and saved a civilization. The price was anonymity. The reward was survival. And for 30 years, no one could say thank you.